Hi, my name is Karen Fabian and I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and I wanted to do a video today to kind of piggyback off my most recent podcast episode. So after you watch this, if you're interested, I would definitely suggest you go over to iTunes or Podbean and look up Conversations for Yoga Teachers. That's my podcast, and the most recent episode I talked about this idea of a bad cue. And I think this is one of those things that if you've been teaching for a while, or even if you're a newer teacher and you've been just kind of following along with some of the topics that have been posted online about yoga teaching, one of the things that has come up is this idea of a bad cue. Things I would never say, things I don't say anymore, 10 cues not to say. And while I think there's some aspect of those titles that has to do with just getting people to click the article, the heart of those articles has to do with this idea of some movements aren't good, some cues are bad, or some combination of both. And I wanted to talk about some examples today and just explore this idea a little bit further. So let's take this idea of a cue that might not be really helpful. So let's say you have somebody in Warrior One and their arms are reaching up. Now, if you're less familiar with anatomical movements, arms reaching up is an action cue, right? So you would say to somebody, reach your arms up to the sky for that posture. However, the anatomical movement is shoulder flexion. So the anatomical movement is described from the joint at which it occurs. So when I reach my arms up in the air, the movement of the limb to that position is done from the joint. And in this case, it's done from the shoulder joint, right? It's not done from the hip or the ankle. And so this is shoulder flexion. Now, I've done some other videos on this. When the shoulder moves into flexion, the scapula has to upwardly rotate a bit so that this part of the scapula that sticks out, the acromion, can shift a little bit more, I guess you could say laterally and superiorly, upward and to the side, to allow the head of the humerus to clear. Otherwise, it would hit this, and it would only be able to go so far. And so this is why it can be difficult, not really difficult, it can be troublesome for people if you tell them to drop their shoulder blades when they're reaching up in the air. However, sometimes what you'll hear when people teach Warrior One is reach your arms up high, drop your shoulder blades. And sometimes this has to do with teachers being concerned about how this looks, that they somehow feel like, because I've had a lot of conversations about this over the years, they somehow feel like the aesthetic of this is not good and this looks better to kind of smooth it out. I don't know. Sometimes these things, when teachers don't understand the anatomy and they just say stuff, this is where all this kind of stuff comes from. So the idea you might pull from this conversation is, oh, when people reach their arms up in the air, I should never say drop the shoulders. And this is where I want to dive into this a little bit deeper and introduce another concept to you, which is that of degree. If I say drop your shoulders, you're probably going to do this. If I say relax your shoulders, you might just do that. And so, like many things, nuance is oftentimes the factor that people don't consider when they're looking at a right or a wrong, like a binary choice. In the context of giving cues to people in movement, there really is less of a right and wrong. There's usually more of a range. And it's kind of interesting because range is how you would describe movements from joints. Joints, in this case, the shoulder joint doesn't just flex here. It's flexing here, it's flexing here, here. There's a range of motion. And in fact, that's what we measure in physical therapy when we want to see what kind of injury or impact an injury is having on a joint. We're looking at the range of motion of that joint. So back to my example, what that means, to me at least, is while I might not want to say drop the shoulder blades here, I could say relax them if I saw excessive scapular elevation. Now, if I don't see excessive scapular elevation and the person's just reaching up, that's fine. The idea is we don't want to say never say drop the shoulders or never say relax the shoulders. We want to just introduce this nuanced quality of degree. So another one, here's another one. So again, in Warrior One, stack the knee over the heel. reach your arms up to the sky. So stacking knees over the heel becomes this kind of bedrock principle having to do with stability when the joints are stacked. However, as you notice in something like a squat, the knee is not over the heel. So this is again an example where something we're holding so firmly to goes out the window when we change the position. And to a certain extent, here it has to do with the position of the hips. Now my hips are in external rotation, here my hip is not. And so it's going to be really hard for me to turn my hips into external rotation and not have my knee go past the heel. Now again, matter of degree. If I take the squat really low, my knee will go past. If I don't go as far, does it make a difference? I mean, to a certain extent, possibly, depending on the condition of my knees. It's just a way to look at it a little bit differently. I'll give you one more. This idea of tucking the tailbone. Tucking the tailbone. So let's look at it from anatomical position. Hips are level. The tailbone is here, and it kind of has that inward curve. So if I take hips level, and I move into something like chair, and then I stick my tailbone out, that's hyperextension. If I see that as a teacher and I say tuck the tail, do you see how oftentimes that brings people into a posterior tilt, which isn't so great either. They don't want to be in chair with that neutral position of the pelvis. There is a bit of an anterior tip without the hyperextension. So here, nuance is going to be really important. And in order for me to communicate nuance, I have to listen, or I have to really think about and be really intentional about the words I use. Just like drop, tuck is going to probably do a lot of action in the students. If I just say maybe talking less to here, talking more to here, pull the belly button in. So the idea being, saying tuck the tailbone is not something I would never say. I might say something instead, or I might say tuck the tailbone, and then if it's too much, I could correct it. So again, there's two implications here that I want to suggest for you to pull away from this. Number one, no movements, generally speaking, are wrong at their face, just like no cues are really wrong at their face. And that nuance is a big thing, degree is a big thing, and the most important thing is when you're cueing your students, please be watching them, right? Don't be practicing. And a harder thing is not to be way up in your head, because if you're in your head, it's going to be hard for you to really be present. And when you're not present when you're teaching, you're going to say things and you're not really going to see what's happening in front of you. I know that might sound weird, but I've been teaching for a long time, and there have been many times I've been teaching and I've been distracted, I've been nervous, I've been feeling uncomfortable for whatever reason, and you can literally be teaching and not really seeing what's happening right in front of you. That's why it's so important to really presence yourself before you teach your classes, take a couple deep breaths, and most importantly, not to be practicing. You might have a mat down, but you're just going to be saying and looking and adjusting what you're saying based upon what you see. So I hope you've enjoyed this. There's a couple things. So the podcast is Conversations for Yoga Teachers. You can find that on iTunes and Podbean. And you can also go to my website and listen. The website is barebonesyoga.com. When you go to the website, right on the homepage is a link for my two signature programs, my mentorship program and my Blueprint Learning program. The Blueprint Learning program is my signature program for teaching you anatomy and how to share it in the cues. So all of this content is there and then some. And it's really a different program from other anatomy trainings in that it's not just the anatomy, it's the application of it. And this is where teachers often fall short and where they often get frustrated with trainings. They learn the content, but they don't know at the end of the training how to apply it. I use live coaching sessions to do that, so it's not just a course. The course will give you the foundation, the anatomy manual I wrote will give you the foundation, and then the live coaching sessions we have together, including practice teaching you'll do with me, gives you the experience and the knowledge and the how-to around applying it to your teaching. So on the website you'll see the link to both of those programs. The mentorship is more of a one-on-one program. And you can sign up for the wait list, and when I open it for enrollment, you'll be the first to know. The website's barebonesyoga.com. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.